CTT is an online Christian apologetics ministry that seeks to promote the life of the Christian mind. How do we do this? We promote the life of the Christian mind in various ways, one of which is hosting free, accessible lectures like what we are having this evening. We do this because we all value the role of human reason in discovering truths, in growing as a Christian, and in becoming an effective witness of the gospel to other people. And lately, we have been more motivated to push this ministry because of the clear indicators that secularism is rising fast here in our country, the Philippines. And I honestly think that most of our churches, being a pastor myself, are not ready for this because most of them don't want to invest time, resources in teaching apologetics to our Christian brothers and sisters. And that is mainly why we exist. We are here to help equip the mind of Filipino churches because most probably no one will, so that they can engage the intellect of secular people with the gospel message more effectively. And I'd like to read this for everyone before I end. It is time that we reclaim the Christian mind and return to the church her rightful place as the queen of philosophical thought and the king of scientific advancement, here in our country at least. And just a few reminders while the session is ongoing. Keep your microphones muted, and we encourage everyone to ask questions. So while Dr. Liz Jackson is delivering her lecture this evening, think of your questions, write it down, and send it to our messenger, message us, or in the message section in the chat in the Zoom room. So I would like to pass on the microphone to Kyle.
Yeah, glad you're all here. So everybody, welcome. We try to do these sessions around twice a month, and this is a particularly important session for us tonight. So I have the privilege and the honor of introducing Dr. Jackson, who also she's married, so she has another last name, but we were given the privilege of using Dr. Jackson. So let me introduce her for all of you who may not know her. She has a PhD in philosophy from Notre Dame and currently serves as an assistant professor of philosophy, or in the Department of Philosophy at Ryerson University, and a visiting professor of philosophy at Palm Beach Atlantic University. I've been particularly blessed and privileged to read her work, quite a bit of it actually. She's published really widely in the fields of epistemology, or the study of how we come to know things, and knowledge. A few particular papers that have been important to me: Wagering Against Divine Hiddenness, I found to be a really interesting take on divine hiddenness. Her paper, Salvaging Pascal's Wager, is something that was particularly influential for me because I felt like Pascal's wager was a weak argument. Her other paper, called Belief, Credence, and Faith, paired with the paper Faith and Reason, has really helped me to understand the nature of faith and how faith works in the Christian life, but in life in general. And then her paper, The Nature of Rationality and Faith, is also a paper that I recommend everybody read that's a Christian. So Dr. Jackson is widely published, a professional philosopher of the highest caliber, and her classes and YouTube videos on critical thinking have been really useful for me and for those of us in the administration here at CTT. So we hope that tonight you guys will learn something new, that you'll be able to take away from this an introduction to critical thinking and how to employ your mind, how to employ reason, and how to employ the ability to think logically in your Christian life and in life in general. So Dr. Jackson, we're glad you're here. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you taking your Sunday morning to be with us on our Sunday evening. And so feel free to take it away whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kyle. And thanks to everyone for coming and being here. I'm super excited for what we're going to talk about today. And thanks for giving your time to come learn about Christians, how Christians can think critically. So if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Can everyone see that? Everyone good? Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'm supposed to turn annotations off. Oh, okay, I think annotations are off. So great. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Whoops. I guess that was just the title slide, so we can. Okay, so that's the title slide. This lecture is going to be about critical thinking for Christians. So we're going to talk about some of the things that I talked about in my YouTube series on critical thinking, but it's going to be compressed. So if you're like super into this and want more, I would recommend go check out that series. I think it's a 8 or 9 video series. Most videos are like 20 to 30 minutes, so you can watch them all at once. You can watch them in chunks, however you want. But this is sort of a summary of some of the stuff from that series. And then also I added some things about, I think, why critical thinking is so important for Christians. Okay, so let's jump in. Okay, so let's start with this question. What is critical thinking? Sorry. Okay. So critical thinking is the study and analysis of arguments. And we're going to say what an argument is, what we mean by argument in just a second. But I also wanted to add this. One of the main goals of critical thinking is to be more rational, to think more rationally. And this includes in what we believe, in how we reason, in how we gather evidence, how we evaluate that evidence that we gather, and then also how we dialogue with others. And then I want to say, I think the ultimate goal of all of this, analyzing arguments and becoming more rational, is to find the truth. I think that's a really important thing that everyone should care about, but Christians should especially care about. We want to know the truth, especially about these really important life questions that a lot of times are what philosophy tells us about. And, you know, as Christians, that truth, I think, is found in Jesus. So I think this ultimate goal is to find the truth and find that truth in Jesus. And that's sort of the ultimate reason we should care about critical thinking. But I wanted to address a little bit more detail why I think critical thinking is so important for Christians in particular, because I really believe that it is. And so there's sort of 4 points I wanted to make before we jump into what is an argument. And we're going to talk today a lot about what's called argument analysis, and I'll explain that in a second. But I want to address this question first. So the first reason that I think Christians should care about critical thinking is what I'm calling knowing. And basically this is so we can know why we believe what we believe, why we believe that Christianity is true, why we believe that God exists, why we believe that Jesus rose from the dead. And so look, when we have doubts and questions about our faith, we should not stick our heads in the sand. We should not just ignore those doubts and say, let's just have more faith. What we should do is go and find answers. And there's lots of amazing work being done by Christian philosophers and academics. And I don't know if this is true in the Philippines, but I think in the US, when you hear the word philosopher, some people automatically just think atheist. But that's actually not true. There's so many, Kyle and others know that there's all these Christian philosophers doing this work to defend Christianity and show there are good reasons to believe Christianity. And so one reason I think critical thinking is important is because it can help us see those reasons and be really clear for ourselves why we believe that Christianity is true. And I wanted to say this too. Look, Thomas in the Bible, he's a very famous doubter. He's often known as Doubting Thomas. And, what did Jesus do when Thomas was doubting? Did he just say, just have faith? Like, don't worry about it. I'm not going to give you any reasons. Just have faith and ignore your questions. No, Jesus gave him evidence. Not only did he gave him evidence that Thomas could literally touch. He said, touch my hands, touch my side, So Jesus didn't respond to doubters either by saying, stick your head in the sand. He said, look at the evidence. And that's what I want to do today. So that's the first reason. Critical thinking is important to know why we believe that Christianity is true. But it's also important for what you might call showing. And I think this is to give an answer to those who ask of us. So sometimes when people find out that we're a Christian, they might wonder, well, why are you a Christian? What do you say about the fact that there's evil in the world? Or how do you know that the Bible is true? And I think sometimes people genuinely have trouble accepting Christianity because they don't understand how does Christianity make sense of evil? Or how could you believe that Jesus rose from the dead? So we need to have answers when people ask us these questions. Why do you believe Christianity rather than another religion? Why think that God exists? Why think that there can be miracles? And I think critical thinking can really help us not only to know for ourselves why we believe what we believe, but to show to others why we believe that Christianity is true. And of course, I don't think this means that these questions, these intellectual barriers are the only barriers for people. I think oftentimes when we're talking to other people about Christianity, sometimes they don't want it to be true. And I think, that could be a barrier in and of itself, right? They might have their questions answered, but if they don't want it to be true, that doesn't automatically mean they'll accept it. But I think nonetheless, critical thinking can really help us overcome these intellectual barriers and help other people overcome those barriers. Okay, 2 more reasons why Christians should care about critical thinking. So the third reason is that I think this is part of following Jesus' example. When you read the Gospels, you see Jesus was an amazing communicator. He thought so clearly, and he got hit with tough questions all the time. And he gave amazing answers. And he also, I think it was really cool to see how Jesus used parables to connect with his audience. And this is one reason that when I'm teaching or doing something on YouTube, I really try to use a lot of examples and stories. I think they're super important. But I think critical thinking can help us think clearly and imitate Jesus's example, how Jesus thought clearly, was a great communicator, and had great answers when people asked Jesus tough questions. Okay, here's the final one, and this one is super important. So faith is actually one of the big areas that I do research in. And so we can talk more about this in Q&A if you want to talk about it. But I strongly believe that faith is not just believing something without any evidence for it, or believing something that isn't true. That is not what faith is. So someone might say, I don't need critical thinking, I just have faith. And I want to say, no. That is the wrong way to think about faith. Faith is based on evidence. And I do think there is some sense in which faith could go beyond the evidence, because faith can help us keep our commitments when we encounter counter evidence and doubts. So I do think that's true. We can talk more about that in Q&A if you want to talk about that. But I also think faith and evidence are not opposed to each other. And I'm going to give a quick example to illustrate this. So let's say you have faith. I don't know if basketball is big in the Philippines, but I like basketball. And so let's say your friend's team is playing in a really important basketball game. And if they win that game, they're going to go to playoffs, and like really big game, really important. And so you have faith they're going to win the game. You come to the game and you sit down, and very sadly, they get completely crushed. They lose by 40 points right in front of your eyes. It's very clear they are not going to go to playoffs, right? You have evidence that makes that almost 100% sure they're not going to playoffs. Okay. So let's say instead of following that evidence and saying, that's really sad, I'm bummed for you guys, sorry you lost your game, you say, nope, I continue to have faith. I believe you guys are going to go to playoffs and win playoffs. I have faith in your team. Faith is not based on evidence. Faith is, I'm just going to ignore the evidence. And then you show up to their playoff game and you have body paint all over you and you're ready to cheer for them. Okay. No one's going to say, oh my gosh, you have such amazing faith. Look at you. No, we're going to say, what are you doing? You're so confused. You're delusional. They lost the game. You saw it, right? So the point is that, yes, maybe in some sense faith goes beyond the evidence, but at a certain point, you need to give up your faith. You have faith cannot, should not persist if you are 100% sure that something is false. Okay, so this is what I mean when I say faith and evidence are not opposed to each other. This view that faith and evidence are totally opposed to each other, it's often known as fideism, and I don't think fideism is the way to go. So I think having evidence and knowing why we believe what we believe and seeing that there are good reasons to believe Christianity is true. There are Christian philosophers publishing in top journals reasons to believe that Christianity is true. That's super, super important. And that's one reason I'm so passionate about Christians doing critical thinking. Okay. So now we're going to move into basically a quick summary of, I think, some of the important points from this critical thinking series. And so the first question that I want to talk about is the question, what is an argument? We said critical thinking, one of the main things critical thinking is about, it's about the analysis of arguments. Okay. So an argument is not two people yelling at each other. We use that word to sometimes say they're arguing or whatever. That's not what we're talking about here. So what we mean by argument is reasons or evidence to believe some conclusion. So, for example, if there's a first cause, then God exists. There's a first cause, therefore God exists. This is an argument for the existence of God. The first two, those are what number one and number two, they're called premises, and those premises support the conclusion, which is an argument for the existence of God. So this is reasons or evidence to believe that God exists. Here's another argument. If she's vegan, then she doesn't eat meat. She eats meat, therefore she's not vegan. You might think it's silly. Why are we arguing about whether she's vegan? But it's actually kind of cool. Arguments can be about any topic. So your arguments can be about whether God exists. They can be about ethics and morality, or they can be about something as, something like whether it's going to rain tomorrow. And this is one reason I think critical thinking is so cool and important, is you can apply it to pretty much any area of your life. You can make arguments about any topic that you're wanting to think clearly about or wanting to learn more about. Okay, so we were just looking at arguments and they were numbered. So what is that? What's that all about? Okay, that's what's called standard form. So like I mentioned, there are two main parts of an argument. There's the conclusion. That's the statement on the last line, the statement that's being argued for. And then there's the premises, and the premises are reasons or evidence for the conclusion. The premises are supposed to support the conclusion, give you reasons to believe the conclusion. And what I highly recommend, and I teach this to all my students as well, is that we analyze arguments in what's called standard form. So in standard form, the premises are written each on their own line, and they're numbered for easy reference. So you can say, I think premise 1 is false, or I think premise 2 is true, or whatever. It's easy to refer to them. And then we also want to state them clearly. So we don't want to have a premise that's like 2 paragraphs of just like rambling. You want your premise to be clear and succinct so people can see what you're trying to get at. And then you have the conclusion. That's the statement that's being argued for. The conclusion is also on its own line, and it's often numbered. It doesn't have to be necessarily, but I think it's helpful. So we're going to talk about a bunch of examples of standard form in a second, but I want to say why I think standard form is really helpful for thinking clearly, especially about tough issues. So often when someone's trying to convince us of something, you could think about, a discussion that two people are having about like morality or politics. You could think about watching a politician in a debate form. You could think about watching a YouTube video. You could even think about reading a book or magazine. So when someone's trying to convince us of something, they're often going to give some evidence or support for their conclusion. But they also sometimes provide other material. So sometimes they'll give examples. I think examples are great. Like I said, Jesus even used examples. I think they can really aid with understanding, but often examples aren't a crucial part of the author's premises. Sometimes they'll throw jokes in there. Sometimes they'll give appeals to emotion. Sometimes they'll make comments about people who disagree with them, maybe even kind of insulting ones. Sometimes they'll give you stories from their own life, etc. And so what we want to do is we want to isolate what is the material that the author's giving that actually supports their conclusion, and what is this kind of extra stuff that might be helpful for understanding, but isn't actually direct evidence or reasons for the author's conclusion. And that's one reason I think standard form is so important. It helps us see exactly what the author's reasons are, and then we can evaluate, do those actually support the author's conclusion or not? And this helps too when we're thinking through, why do I believe X or Y or Z? We can use standard form to sort of write out our reasons and then see, does that actually support this thing I believe, or does it support something slightly different, or does it not support it at all? So I think standard form is very helpful, and we're going to be working mostly with that today. So here's some examples of standard form. This is a purple flower, therefore this is a flower. So the premise, this is a purple flower, supports the conclusion that this is a flower. I don't know if anyone follows American sports, but the Super Bowl was a couple months ago. It actually was in Tampa, where I live right now. And there were two teams playing. It's this huge football game, basically like the winner of like the whole United States. This game determines that. And so the Chiefs are my team. I'm actually from Kansas. And then the Bucks were playing the Chiefs. And the Bucks are actually from Tampa. So you might say, look, either the Chiefs won the Super Bowl or the Bucks won the Super Bowl. They were the two teams playing. The Chiefs did not win the Super Bowl, therefore the Bucks won the Super Bowl. That's actually true. It was very sad. I was cheering for the Chiefs and they lost. But yeah, there's an argument in standard form. Here's another argument. If you're watching this presentation, then you have an internet connection. You're watching this presentation, therefore you have an internet connection. Okay, so these are all examples of what we mean by arguments in standard form. Notice that the premises, which are in black, they're numbered. And notice that the premises then support the conclusion, which is written after the premises in green. And notice that we stated them clearly. They're not wordy. We can have a good sense of what these arguments are saying. So that's why this is standard form. Okay. And note that with arguments, you can actually have any number of premises. So this first argument only has one premise. There are arguments that have like 20, 30, 40 premises. Those get a little bit intense. Those are hard to follow. I usually try to keep mine to like under 5, but you can in theory have any number of premises. And also the order of the premises doesn't matter. As long as the premises support the conclusion in the right way, you can switch the order around. Not a big deal. Okay, so now I want to address the question, where are arguments? Arguments are everywhere. On the news, in books you read, in the Bible, in your head, in your family's heads, in your coworkers' heads, on TV and on YouTube. There are really actually arguments everywhere. They're not always written in standard form, but all these places contain conclusions and then premises that support those conclusions, reasons to believe those conclusions. So really, arguments are all around us. And I think this is one reason critical thinking and this study of argument analysis is so important. Critical thinking can help us both in the first person. So with ourselves, we can help us clear up our own thoughts. We can reason through an issue. We can weigh our evidence. We can, again, say, I believe this thing. What are my actual reasons for that? And sort of think through that clearly. It can also help us in the second person. So in relationships with our friends, family, those around us, it can help us communicate better. Someone's trying to tell you we should do this thing. And then you can say, okay, that's maybe their conclusion. What are their premises? And then you can really think through that. And then if you disagree with them, you can say, well, I don't think this premise is true. I think it really can help with communication. And then it can also help us in the third person. So when we're hearing some third party's argument on TV, social media, we're watching a politician, reading a book, watching a video, I think this really helps us to analyze those arguments that we hear there as well. Okay, so the main structure of what I want to talk about today is what's called argument analysis. And this basically goes from the question, is this person making an argument at all, to does this person give me reason to believe their conclusion? And so there's 3 main steps to argument analysis. The first is identifying an argument. And that asks the question, is this author, or you could even say, look at your own head, is this thing I believe, do I have an argument for it at all? But, primarily thinking, is this author, are they making an argument at all? And we're going to talk about some other types of writing other than argumentative writing that they might be giving us instead. Then there's reconstructing an argument. That involves the question, okay, let's say we said, yes, they are making an argument. Then if we reconstruct it, we're going to ask, what argument is this author making? And we're going to try to put it into standard form, like we were just talking about. And then the final step is evaluating an argument. So that involves the question, is this a strong argument or not? Does this argument give us a reason to believe the conclusion? Okay, so that's these 3 steps. We're going to go into all of them in more depth, and that's going to be the main thing we're going to talk about today. Before we jump into that, I want to address one last question, which is to remind us of our goal. Okay, so this is what our goal is not. Our goal is not to make ourselves look good. Our goal is not to prove someone wrong or to make someone else look bad. Our goal is not to just affirm our previously held opinions no matter what, just to there's this thing that psychologists talk about called confirmation bias, which means we often just go out and try to seek to affirm the things that we already believed. But that's not our goal. We want to be sensitive to new evidence and to follow the evidence where it leads. Our goal is also not to win a debate. And I actually don't always like the word debate because I think that makes it about who won and who lost. And I don't think that should be at least our main goal when we're doing argument analysis and critical thinking. So what is our goal then? Well, our ultimate goal is to find the truth, right? And we find the truth by following our evidence, by gathering new evidence, and by looking at the evidence with an open mind. So we're not just going to dismiss our opponent right away just because they disagree with us. Our goal is not to make ourselves look good, but our goal is, look, if they give us new evidence, we should change our mind if the evidence calls for it. And that's part of what it means to find the truth. But we might find out that the evidence supports the thing that we already believed, and then we should keep believing that. But remember, super, super important, our goal in this whole thing is to find the truth. So I want to really emphasize that. Okay. So let's now go into these 3 steps of argument analysis. Remember, it's identifying an argument, reconstructing an argument, and evaluating an argument. So let's start with step 1, identifying an argument. So let's say you're reading a book or watching a video, and you're trying to go and analyze the argument the author is making. How would you identify that this author is making an argument? Well, first, what you want to do is you want to look for the author's conclusion. You want to ask yourself, what is this author trying to communicate? What is their main point? What do they want me to believe? And then ask yourself, does this author have premises? Remember, premises are statements that give reasons to believe the conclusion. They're evidence for the conclusion. And if the author, if you're like, there are good reasons to believe this conclusion, the author has, this person, this speaker, this writer, they have given me some evidence for the conclusion, then it's probably an argument. But if no, and we're going to talk about on the next slide what they might be doing instead, if they haven't given you reasons or evidence for the conclusion, it's probably not an argument. And this is super important because sometimes people will write really forcefully in a really opinionated way, but they actually haven't given you reasons or evidence for their conclusion. And it's really important to identify that. And maybe I'll say this too, like an argument can, well, not even an argument, but a text or a speech can sound really convincing, can sound like, oh man, that person's so confident. Seems like they know what they're talking about. They're so smart. Oh, and their family's so nice. But like, notice, none of those are actually reasons to believe their conclusion. So we want to try to step back from that and try to say, has this author actually given me premises? Have they given me reasons to believe their conclusion? Or are they just a convincing speaker? Are they just a nice person? It's great to be a convincing speaker. It's great to be a nice person, but that doesn't mean they've given you evidence for their conclusion. And that's what argument analysis is interested in. It's the evidence for the conclusion. Okay, so on this, maybe I want to give us 3 types of writing and 2 types of writing that people might be engaged in that don't involve making arguments. I'm going to give an example of each that has to do with a bridge. So the first kind of writing is descriptive writing. And this is writing that simply describes things, and it's not even trying to necessarily convince you of some conclusion. It's just describing the way things are. So here's an example. Work is underway to build a bridge over the river. The bridge will be 50 meters long and 20 meters high. It's just telling you about this bridge and what's going on, not really trying to convince you, just describing something. A lot of news articles, maybe not all of them, some news articles are quite opinionated, but some of them will just be describing events that happened or describing an object or something like that. Okay. Then there's rhetorical writing. And this one is very important because I think a lot of times we mistake rhetorical writing for argumentative writing. So rhetorical writing asserts a position, but it doesn't give evidence or reasons for that position. So here's an example. Clearly, we ought to build a bridge over the river. We should definitely limit the number of cars that can go on it, and let's fix the park while we're at it. Okay, so the person who said this, they're using words like clearly and definitely. They sound kind of opinionated. Maybe they're smart. Maybe they have a nice family, right? But they haven't actually given us any reasons or evidence for this conclusion. They're just kind of saying things that they think we should do. This is what's called rhetorical writing. They're asserting a position, but not giving us evidence or reasons. And then finally, there's argumentative writing, and this is the kind that argument analysis is interested in. When you're doing step one, identifying an argument, this is what you want to look for. Argumentative writing gives reasons and evidence to support or establish a conclusion. So we ought to build a bridge over the river because doing so is the best way to solve our traffic problems. So notice their conclusion is we ought to build a bridge over the river, and then their premise is building a bridge over the river is the best way to solve our traffic problems. So when you're doing argument analysis, this is the kind of thing you want to hone in on, and you say, yes, they have given us a reason. They have given us some evidence for their conclusion. Okay, so that's step one. You want to identify the author's conclusion and then say, does the author have premises, reasons, or evidence for their conclusion? Let's move on to step two. I'm going to see, okay, I have about 20 minutes. Okay. Step two is reconstructing an argument. So we've identified an argument. We've said, yes, this author has given us a conclusion and then premises for that conclusion. Now what we want to do is figure out what exactly, how is that argument structured? What is that argument? And so again, we start with the conclusion because that's the easy part to identify. And hopefully at this point, we've already sort of identified that, but we want to try to be as clear as possible on what's the overall point of this text or speech? What is the author trying to get me to believe? And after that, then we'll say, okay, I have determined this is an argument. What exactly are those reasons and evidence that the author gives for their conclusion? And then I highly recommend at this point, you try to set it up in standard form. You number the premises, you say, here's the reasons or evidence the author has given me, and then you put the conclusion at the end. I think that's going to be the easiest way to analyze the argument. And then in 1 second, we're going to talk about what this is. You're going to take this argument, you have premises, you have a conclusion, and you're going to apply what's called the principle of charity to your reconstructed argument. Okay, what the heck is the principle of charity? I'm going to tell you. So the principle of charity says this. When you're reconstructing someone else's argument, what you want to do is you want to try to make that argument as strong as possible. So, sometimes people's writing is unclear. Sometimes when they're giving a speech, they're sort of making a point and giving reasons for it, but kind of going around that point. And what we want to do is we want to be charitable to other people. And we want to say, okay, what is the most convincing or plausible or the best I can construe this argument so that they are giving good evidence for their conclusion. So when we're reconstructing other people's arguments, we want to take the interpretation of their argument that is as strong as possible. That's called the principle of charity. Why the principle of charity? Like, why would we ever do that? And here's why. I mean, this comes back to the goal of argument analysis, which you might remember in the picture you can see its truth. Okay, so suppose an argument can be interpreted in multiple ways. If our goal in argument analysis was just to win a debate, or to make someone look bad, or to make ourselves look good, then an effective way to reconstruct their argument would be to make it super weak, to twist their words, to try to maybe even make it sound like they're saying something that they're not saying, because you want to make yourselves look good and make them look bad and try to win this debate, right? So if that was our goal, then yeah, you shouldn't use the principle of charity. But that's absolutely not our goal. Our goal is to find the truth. And because our goal is to find the truth, when we interpret their argument, we want it to be as charitable as possible because we want to ask ourselves, have they actually given us good evidence or reasons for their conclusion? Because if they have, then we should change our confidence levels. We should be more confident in their conclusion. And so when we're looking at other people's arguments, we want to be charitable because being charitable is the best way to find the truth, which is our ultimate goal. Okay, so at this point, let's just review. We have identified an argument. We've said this author has given us a conclusion and evidence or reasons for that conclusion, namely premises. Then we've reconstructed that argument. we've put that argument in standard form. So we've numbered the premises, put the conclusion on its own line after the premises, and we've applied the principle of charity. We've attempted to make their argument as strong as possible because that's the best way to get to the truth. Now we're going to move to step 3. And I'm going to be brief here, but I encourage you, if you're interested in this, go watch those critical thinking videos on my YouTube channel. I go into way more depth there. Step 3 is evaluating an argument. So we have this argument in standard form. What you want to do at this point is ask yourself 2 questions. Question number 1, does the conclusion follow from the premises? This is what's known as validity. And I have a 40-minute video on validity. We're not going to talk about it a ton here. You should go watch that video. But basically what you want to ask yourself is, do the premises actually support the conclusion? Do the premises give us a good reason to believe the conclusion or not? And then the second question you want to ask yourself is, are the premises true? Are they supported by the evidence? Are they reasonable to believe? So those are sort of the 2 steps of argument evaluation, and you really need both. Okay, so here's my slide on valid arguments. If an argument is a good one, then the premises need to support the conclusion. Here's a really bad argument. My candle smells nice. It is warm outside. Therefore, God exists. I mean, look, that's a nice argument. The premises are clear. It's set up in standard form, but that's not an argument for God's existence. No one's going to take those reasons as evidence to support that God exists. This is why an argument needs to be valid. The premises need to support the conclusion, give us a reason to believe the conclusion. And if you go look at, I put these 2 videos on screenshots of these 2 videos on the slide, but either of these 2 videos you should watch. The validity one is more just about validity and what it is. We talk about some of these patterns I'm going to mention, but the logic one then goes way more in depth and into these patterns. But valid arguments actually follow simple patterns. So here's a super common argument pattern. If A, then B. A, therefore B. So this is what's actually called modus ponens. You don't really need to know that, but might be helpful. Super common argument pattern. And if you know that A and B are going to be statements, and if A and B are the same statements throughout, then this is going to be a valid argument form. So it means that the premises support the conclusion follows from the premises. Here's another valid argument form. If A, then B, not B, therefore not A. Okay, so actually, we talked a couple slides ago about some argument examples. I'll give an example of each. So the first one would be, if there's a first cause, then God exists. There's a first cause, therefore God exists. That's a valid argument, and at least gives some reasons to believe in God. We're going to talk about in a second the second step, but at least it's a valid argument. And then here's the second one. If she's vegan, then she doesn't eat meat. She does eat meat, therefore she's not vegan. That's an example of this second argument pattern. So we're not going to go into all the argument patterns today. There's a lot of them. But if you're really interested in this, go check out those 2 videos. There's also patterns you can use to identify invalid arguments. So cases where it might seem like the premises support the conclusion, but they actually don't. Okay, so step 1 of argument evaluation, do the premises support the conclusion or not? However, simply being valid is not enough for an argument to be a good one. And here's why. This is a valid argument. If the moon is purple, then God exists. The moon is purple, therefore God exists. So that actually follows the argument form we were just talking about, modus ponens, right? But this is not, again, it's not a good argument for God's existence because the premises are not true. Right? So after we've determined that an argument is valid, we need to then evaluate the argument's premises. Are they true? Are they reasonable to believe? Those are the questions you need to ask yourself. And if the argument is valid and the premises are true, then great, you have a good argument. You've completed your argument analysis and you can raise your confidence in the argument's conclusion. But what's great about argument analysis is that if things fail at one of these steps, then you can have a very good reason to think, I don't need to raise my confidence in this author's conclusion. It might be at the very beginning. They actually haven't even given you any reasons or evidence at all for their argument. Or maybe the argument isn't valid, Or maybe it's valid, but one of the premises is false. So, either way, whether you raise your confidence or not, using this method, you can be sure that you've really identified whether there's a good reason here to raise your confidence. And again, I'll remind everyone, use the principle of charity and try to make their argument as strong as possible. That's a really important part of this, because if you just don't want to believe their conclusion, you could probably convince yourself to make the argument really weak and say they haven't really given evidence. And you want to really check yourself and ask, is this the most plausible? Is this the strongest version of the author's argument? Okay, so those are sort of our 3 steps of argument analysis. And that's kind of the main crux of the talk. So the last thing I wanted to say before I kind of close up is I think this is actually really helpful. There's 6 ways that I think people tend to deal with arguments. So the first 5 ways I'm going to talk about, they're not great ways to deal with arguments. I want to encourage you to avoid those. And then the final way is a good way to deal with arguments. Okay, so here's the 6 ways. There's the credulous person. Sometimes this is what is also known as gullible, if you've heard that word. This person just believes everything they hear. If someone says, it's snowing today and it's the middle of summer, they'll say, really? Those kinds of people. You don't want to do this. Sometimes people just say things, right? So this is why it's so important to go through our steps and say, have they really given us a reason for their conclusion? And if not, I don't have to just believe them. So we shouldn't just believe everything that we hear. Then some people swing the pendulum to the opposite direction. There's the person of contradiction, which believes the opposite of everything that they hear. So if you say, oh, it's supposed to be sunny tomorrow, they'll say, nope, no, it's not. It's supposed to rain tomorrow. Like, they don't even care if they have evidence for it or not. They'll just contradict everything you say. I've known people that kind of do this, at least sometimes. We also don't want to do this, right? We don't want to just assume everyone around us is wrong. So we don't want to just believe everyone automatically, but we also don't want to believe the opposite of everything we hear. Then there's what's called the dogmatist. And we actually already talked a little bit about what's called confirmation bias. That's this idea that we want to find evidence that confirms what we already believe. But the dogmatist just holds on to their own opinions no matter what. We also don't want to do this, because what is the point of critical thinking and argument analysis? It's to get new evidence, to make our beliefs and our belief-forming practices more rational, to ultimately get us to the truth. And if all we do is hold on to our own opinions, we're not going to be sensitive to new evidence and new arguments. We're not going to make our beliefs more rational, and we're not going to get closer to the truth, because all we're doing is holding on to our own opinions. So we want to be sensitive to new evidence and not just be a dogmatist. Okay. Then there's the skeptic. The skeptic just doesn't really believe anything. Skeptics just kind of step back and say, no, I don't really believe that. No, I don't really believe that. And I don't think this is a great position either. I think true beliefs are really, really valuable. And the problem with the skeptic is that they're so worried about having a false belief, they just don't believe anything. I actually did a video with Cameron Bertuzzi. He has a YouTube channel called Capturing Christianity, and it's called How Skepticism Can Be Irrational. So if you're interested in skepticism, you can go check that out. I also have a video on skepticism on my YouTube channel as well. That video is more just kind of explaining skepticism in the main debates. And then the video with Cam is more why I'm not a skeptic. But I think we should be careful to not be so, we're just like, it's almost like the skeptic is scared. They just don't want to believe anything, but they don't see the value of maybe taking a little bit of a risk and trying to get a true belief. So don't be skeptics. And then the last way that I think we should not deal with arguments, it's what's called relativists. Relativists try to say everyone is right. And the problem is, on a lot of these issues, everyone can't be right. People disagree and have disagreed for a very long time about whether God exists. But either there's a God or there's not a God. It's not like God exists for the people that believe in God and then God doesn't exist for the people that don't believe in God. So it can't be that everyone is right about these issues. And I have a video on truth, the nature of truth, that you should go check out if you're just not convinced here. But on a lot of these issues, it's just not true that everyone could be right. And here's another problem with relativism. So let's say the relativists, they say everyone is right. And then I say, No, relativists. I think some people are right and some people are wrong. So does the relativist also say that I'm right? If the relativist says that I'm right, then it seems like they're changing their position. But if the relativist says that I'm wrong, then they can't be also saying that everyone is right. So relativism, it seems to do this thing that philosophers call self-defeating. In saying everyone is right, you're also saying the people that think some people are wrong are right. But then that contradicts your original position. So there's another reason not to be a relativist. Okay, so those are the 5 bad ways. Don't do those last 5 things. Instead, what we should do is be rational thinkers. Okay, rational thinkers. They examine arguments with an open mind. They're not engaging in confirmation bias. They're not just trying to affirm their previously held opinions. They're trying to actually ask themselves, has this author given a good reason for their conclusion? That's why we use the principle of charity. They change their mind when the arguments call for it. If they find a really good argument for some conclusion, they change their view. And this is one thing I really admire about philosophers. Philosophers do change their mind. Not always, of course, but I do think philosophers do this a little bit better than some other people that just sort of hold on to their own opinions their whole life. Rational thinkers, they'll give up comfortable or popular beliefs if the arguments call for it. So the fact that everyone believes something, that's not automatically a reason to believe that thing. If they think there's a really good argument that most people are wrong about something, they'll follow the argument rather than the crowd. But at the same time, just because something's popular doesn't mean it's false. And so if the argument supports the thing that everyone believes, then they'll follow the argument and believe what everyone believes. So they will go along with popular views if the arguments call for it. And then finally, they'll form beliefs on good evidence, and they don't demand that the evidence always be perfect. And this is, I think, what's wrong with the skeptic. The skeptic requires that our evidence always be perfect all the time. But if you require that our evidence always be perfect all the time, you're going to end up pretty much giving up all of your beliefs. So look, I sense that there's a table here. I see it, I'm touching it, but what if I'm dreaming right now? What if I'm in the Matrix? You can, of course, those are very far-fetched possibilities. They're very unlikely. But even my evidence for something as basic and simple as that there's a table right here is not perfect. So sometimes we have to form beliefs on good evidence. I think it's totally reasonable for me to believe that there's a table right here, even if the evidence is not perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to sum up what we've covered and then say a few things in closing. So here's what we've talked about. We've talked about what is critical thinking and 4 reasons that Christians should care about critical thinking. We've then talked about what are arguments, why we like to examine arguments in standard form, and then where are arguments? Remember, they're everywhere. And then we went into our 3 steps of argument analysis. And first, we talked about our goal of argument analysis, and that's to find the truth. Step 1 was identifying an argument. Step 2, reconstructing the argument. And then step 3, evaluating the argument. And then we talked about 6 ways that people deal with arguments and that we should strive to be rational thinkers. So I wanted to make a couple book recommendations and then just tell everyone where you can find out more about me, and then I'll be done. Okay, so if you're really interested in logic and critical thinking, want to learn more about this, Feldman, Reason and Argument is actually the book that I used in my critical thinking class. So that would be a book I would recommend. Another book that I think is super, super interesting is by Daniel Kahneman, and it's called Thinking Fast and Slow. So Daniel Kahneman is actually not a philosopher, but he talks about ways. So remember I mentioned confirmation bias. He talks about a bunch of other biases like that and ways that our brains tend to take shortcuts, but maybe at least sometimes in ways that are not rational. So if you're interested in like psychology or how the brain works, I highly, highly recommend Kahneman's book. Another critical thinking book that I know a lot of people use, some of my colleagues use, is by Vaughan, and it's called The Power of Critical Thinking. And then if you're more into the logic side of things, so when I was talking about validity, I said arguments follow these patterns, and some are, valid and some are invalid. If you're really interested in that, check out my videos on validity and logic. But Nelson Lawn has a book called Classical Logic and Its Rabbit Holes, and I think it's one of the most commonly used books that I've seen in logic. So I would recommend that. And then if you're just interested in learning more about philosophy, I want to make 2 recommendations. So the first is Dolores Morris. She's actually one of my friends, and she teaches here in Tampa. And she is writing a book called Believing Philosophy, A Guide to Becoming a Christian Philosopher. I think the book is about to come out, and I think you can pre-order it. So I highly recommend her book. I think it should be accessible to people if you don't have a lot of background in philosophy. And it's about basically Christian philosophy. So I really recommend that to people. And then a little bit more of an advanced book, if you're interested in Christian philosophy and philosophy of religion, Michael Ray and Louis Poyman have a book called Philosophy of Religion, an anthology. And it's basically a collection of philosophy of religion articles that I think Christians interested in philosophy would be into. So those are some book recommendations if you want to sort of dive deeper. And then if you want to find out more about me, I have 2 recommendations. So the first is my website, which is liz-jackson.com. So go check that out. I have a research page, which is academic articles. So if you want to read some of the papers that I've written that are a little more academic, I know Kyle has read many of these, go check out that research page. But then I also have a public philosophy page. It's just called Public Philosophy. And I have blog posts, I have interviews, I have videos, podcasts. So if you're not really wanting to go read like a peer-reviewed paper in a journal, but you just kind of want to like watch some more videos or maybe hear some interviews, and I actually even have there some like shorter summaries of some of my articles, go check out that page. It's called Public Philosophy. Okay, and then also, like I mentioned, I have a YouTube channel, and this is actually a screenshot of my YouTube channel. So that's the URL. It's Liz Jackson 111. Make sure you put the user thing in there though. If you just put youtube.com/Liz Jackson 111, it won't work. But I have a bunch of videos. So these are some of my critical thinking videos. If you scroll down on this page, I have a whole playlist on critical thinking, but I also have a playlist on my research. I have a playlist on epistemology. So there's a lot of stuff on there. So go check that out too. And that's all I have. So thank you.
So that was wonderful, and that was very smooth. Thank you for it. So just to mention as well, the admin team has been reading Dolores Morris' book, it's just Believing Philosophy, and we've been going through it, and it's so wonderful. I really recommend, once it's out, I really recommend everyone to read it. So Kyle asked for permission if we were able to read it as a group and learn from the thoughts and lessons there. So there are a couple of questions here. Just to remind everyone, there are questions that are already redundant, and we've been seeing it. And so we are trying to filter these things out because we want to focus on subject by subject or even expound on certain things for Dr. Liz Jackson. And so we're going to start with the things that you mentioned earlier from the talk, which is about evidence. So how would you define evidence in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great question. So evidence is something. So maybe I'll say this first of all. I think when we hear the word evidence, we think about things like a fingerprint on a gun or something you would use in a court of law, like that kind of thing. That is evidence. But philosophers think evidence is much broader than that. There's a lot more things that count as evidence than just like scientific evidence or things we can touch, feel, smell, whatever. So I think a pretty good definition of evidence is something is evidence for a theory or hypothesis or even a statement if it raises or lowers the probability of that statement. So I'll just give a quick example. If I go outside and I see that the ground is wet, that is evidence that it rained recently, right? That doesn't prove that it rained recently. It just raises the probability. And I'll say this too. If my husband says, I had eggs for breakfast, that's evidence he had eggs for breakfast, right? Again, it's not proof, but especially if I don't have a reason to think he's lying or distrust him, that counts as evidence. So philosophers think it's not just this hard evidence that counts, but experiences, testimony, lots of other things count as evidence as well. And I think that's really important, partially because if we say those aren't evidence, then a lot of the things that we believe every day, we're going to have a lot of trouble explaining how those can be rational. So I think we should take a pretty broad definition of evidence.
It seems like from that kind of definition that it includes the argument as a whole as becoming evidence for such what you call as a claim. So it seems like arguments can be established to be an evidence for a particular claim, right?
Yeah, people on the internet say very weird things. So here's two things I've heard that I think are just totally false. Arguments are not evidence, and claims are not evidence. I think both of those are 100% not true. So arguments are one of our best sources of evidence for a conclusion, especially if they follow the steps we just talked about. If they the premises support the conclusion, and then the premises are true. That's one of the best sources for a conclusion that you're going to get. So arguments are evidence. Is every single argument evidence? Maybe not. Maybe you could have a really bad argument. So remember, I gave an argument that was like, it's warm outside and my candle smells good, so God exists, right? Maybe that's not evidence for God's existence, right? But arguments, good arguments, are absolutely evidence. I'll say something about the claims thing really quick too. Claims are evidence too. My husband claims that he had eggs for breakfast. Unless I think he's really confused or lying, or, unless I have some kind of, but like in most cases, I wouldn't have like this reason to think he's confused or lying. I have evidence he had eggs for breakfast. So claims are absolutely evidence. Again, maybe not always, but in most cases, we believe people when they tell us stuff, and we should. That's rational.
Consider them as testimony and that kind of evidence. It should be considered a lot when we talk about the resurrection and even evidence of apologetics. Anyway, there's a quote of the night. There's a mention in the chat, and this is from you. People on the internet say some weird things. That's coming from you. We're gonna highlight that. Anyway, there's thank you for that. Thank you for answering that. And a lot of questions were about evidence, particularly. Another question is about confirmation bias, and this came earlier also, and then another one came later on the lecture. And the first one is, how do you avoid having biases? And how do we prevent having biases or believing in biased ideas? And then another thing is that, do we put ourselves in a state of neutrality if we want to try to inspect truth, or to seek truth, or something like that? And is that neutrality agnosticism? Would you consider neutrality to be agnosticism?
Yeah, those are great questions. So look, we cannot 100% avoid all biases. That's just, we're trapped in human bodies. We're finite beings. We're humans. God is God. Like, we're not going to totally get out of it. But I do think we can be better at avoiding biases. And again, like, I don't want to just repeat what I just said, but I actually think doing a lot of the things that we just talked about is a good way of doing that. So really looking at arguments with an open mind and asking yourself, has this person given me a good reason to believe the conclusion, even if I disagree with them? And using the principle of charity, trying to make their argument as strong as possible. One thing I'll really emphasize too is interacting with people that disagree with you. I think that's super, super important. So philosophers talk about this thing. So it's called an echo chamber. I don't know if people have heard that term, but social media especially, but other situations too. A lot of us tend to have friends on Facebook or followers on Twitter or whatever that just agree with us. And they're just posting articles and saying things that just affirm our previously held political beliefs or moral beliefs or religious beliefs or whatever, right? Yeah. And sometimes, at least, being in this, what's called an echo chamber, they're just echoing all the things you already believe, can actually be really dangerous. And I want to encourage people, I think being in a Christian community is super important. And I think being in a small group is super important. But I also think it's really important to get out there and meet people and talk to people and be friends with people that can challenge these things that are being said over and over again in your echo chamber. So I think that's an important way to avoid biases, is seeking out people that disagree with you and having open, friendly conversations with them, and acknowledging too, I can firmly hold a position and think there are good arguments for the other position. I firmly believe God exists, but I think the problem of evil is challenging. And I'm not 100% sure that God exists, and that's okay. I believe that God exists. I'm committed to God. I don't have to be certain. And so I think being able to acknowledge there are good arguments for positions you don't agree with is a huge part of this too. And then finally, that book I recommended, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. For me, at least, that book was a game changer. I just feel like it just helped me see so much of the ways that we tend to be biased and the ways that our minds, just certain ways that we don't think rationally because our minds are taking these shortcuts. So a book recommendation for avoiding biases, I would recommend that book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Then the second question, like, do we put ourselves in a place of neutrality?
Yes.
I think not totally, right? I think we can't get outside of our own heads, and we can't, I mean, there's a lot of philosophical issues here, but I don't think we can be perfectly neutral. It's similar to how we can't avoid all biases, but I think doing some of the things that I just mentioned, where you try to talk to people that disagree with you, look for the arguments on the other side, and also acknowledge when the other side does have good arguments. I think that's at least a good way to weigh the evidence in a more fair way and not just engage in confirmation bias. So we can't be perfectly neutral, but I think we can be more neutral. And here, like, let me say one more thing. I think it's really good to even say, what's the best argument for the position I disagree with? And if you have nothing to say about that, I think that's a problem. I think you should be able to say why the people you disagree with, like, a good argument for them. So, I mean, just seeing the arguments on both sides and being open-minded in that way, I think is a really valuable exercise.
Yeah, wonderful. Like, I totally agree with what you said. Like, there's people who can claim certainty in some levels. I don't know where do they get this confidence from, but at least we can. It's being honest. It's being honest that we still have a room for doubt. But at our current state, we can be assured that the data that you have, the arguments that you have, increase your confidence in believing in something to be true. So let me try to proceed to the next question, and let's try to go back from to faith and evidence. So why do you think is there a disengagement or a separation from faith and evidence, and why do you think some people would try to say that faith doesn't need evidence, or that faith doesn't require evidence for something to believe in something? You don't need evidence. Where did this come from? Is there a history on it?
It's a great question. I mean, I think there's probably a number of different reasons. Okay, so reason number one, I think, is actually kind of what we were just talking about like 2 or 3 questions ago. Yeah. People think evidence is like fingerprints on a gun or like scientific evidence, you know? So they have this really narrow understanding of evidence. And I think on some people's understanding of evidence, the way they define it, like, there can't even be evidence that like God exists or something, you know? So I think when we realize evidence is a broader thing, anything that raises or lowers the probability of some hypothesis or claim, then I think we can see like evidence is common, and we actually do have good reasons to believe a lot of the things that we believe. It's just because claims and testimony are evidence, and philosophical arguments are evidence, you know? So I think that's one thing to say. I mean, I do think also there are opponents of religion that want to say religion is bad or harmful because it involves faith. And they say faith is just this irrational thing. It's believing without evidence or believing something you know isn't true. And this is what's so bad and harmful about religion. And then, like, the saddest thing to me is that there are then religious people that say, yeah, that's true, and like agree with that. And they're like, and I don't have to defend myself to you because I agree with your definition of faith. And it's like, I just think, no. Like, that is, we should not agree with that. First of all. But second of all, I think the people that are saying that, they're just defining faith in a certain way. Like, they're not, I don't really see them giving arguments for this. They're just sort of saying, this is what faith is, right? And I think we should challenge that, and we should say, no, that is not what faith is. And look, if you, oh yeah, go ahead.
So some would even try to define faith as a position that is against evidence. For example, like, faith is belief without evidence, and that kind of form. And it's just like circular reasoning to proving the point that it's against evidence.
Yeah, so if all of your evidence supports that something's true, faith is believing it's false. You know, it's like, yeah. So, okay, so here's what I would say to someone who says that. I would say, okay, let's just spot you that definition of faith, because faith is a word, and if you want to define it that way, then I don't want to argue about definitions right now. Now you need to give me an argument that religious people have what you're calling faith, that religious people believe things without evidence. And remember, evidence is this broad thing. Evidence includes testimony and it includes experiences. And I don't think that they're going to be able, maybe they we can let them define faith that way, but then the whole interesting question then is whether religious people have faith. And I don't think religious people have faith in that sense, right? I think religious people do have faith, but they're wrong about faith. So that's what I would say to them. And yeah, I would say, look, realize that evidence is this broad thing. Realize that, a lot more people, evidence for God even isn't just being able to give the cosmological or the ontological argument either. I think that experiencing God and I think perceiving God, I think those things can count as evidence for God as well. So again, it's not like because you don't know, you can't rattle off philosophical arguments that your faith isn't based on evidence. You just have a different kind of evidence. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
I see. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. So another one here is more of practical life and how we treat other people. So the question is, how do you practically present your argument to others who can't take such ideas, mostly to friends, and think of you as somebody who literally argues or maybe quarrels in that kind of category with them when you're really not? So people mistake you as someone who's just here to fight or debate, something like that. So
so it's like you're trying to have a discussion with someone and they just want to argue in the first sense, where it's just like you're kind of just debating or something.
The person is asking, how do we present our arguments in a way that it won't appeal as if you're being argumentative?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, I think one of the biggest things is acknowledging when they have a good point and telling them that and saying, yeah, that's a really good point. And even saying, I need to think more about that. If they give you an objection that you can't answer to, don't just make something up. Honestly, you'll probably make yourself end up looking stupid, but say, that's a really great point. Good question. And then if they give you an argument and you've thought about it and you don't have an answer, then lower your confidence a little bit, So I think being sensitive to what they're saying and not just saying, I'm just going to stay here no matter what, and it doesn't matter what you say or don't say. I think that's really helpful. And also, I'll say too, when I do discussions online, I really try to say, hey, let's focus on the truth, right? What's our point? Why are we here today? I'm not here to make you look bad. I hope you're not here to make me look bad. I want to learn from each other. I want us to give each other, share our knowledge with ourselves and the audience, and then help us both get closer to the truth. And so instead of making it a me versus you kind of thing, it's like we're working together towards this common goal. And I would love to see people who disagree be able to agree on the common goal of the truth. And you could walk away and still disagree, and that's okay. But I think asking yourself, what can I learn from them, rather than asking yourself, how can I prove them wrong, and making that be the focus. I don't know. I don't know if that was practical enough, but I guess I'll say one last thing. Some people are very difficult. And just because someone disagrees with you, I don't think it automatically means you have to engage them. So either, it depends on the situation. If it's someone online that you've never met, you maybe just don't need to engage them at all. If it's someone that's your close family member or friend or whatever, then maybe you say, hey, let's take a break. Let's return to this when things are less heated or something, right? But I don't think in either case, you have to engage it right that second. Either don't engage it at all or take a break and talk about it later. So I'll say that to really think, is this someone I want to be in dialogue with, that I can learn from? And politely, you can say, thanks for the conversation, and then end it there, especially if it's someone on the internet. So
wait a minute. Another admin here wants to follow up something.
Yeah, this is a question related to being in an argument or discussion with someone. So what if you are caught up in an argument wherein you have started arguing, but then in the middle of the argument, you kind of cannot keep up because you lack knowledge of the topic. So what would be your attitude, or what would be your response, or how will you react to that? How will you manage to be still in the conversation and probably learn? So
yeah, I think at that, don't pretend to know things that you don't, and don't just make up an answer if you don't know what you're talking about. And I will say, look, I don't think philosophers are perfect, and I think in some ways they're worse than everyday people. But here's something I think that people can learn from philosophers, and that is they are willing to say this: I need to think more about that. That's a good point. And in philosophy, someone will give a talk, they'll give a controversial argument for some conclusion, and then it's kind of intense, but we'll have an hour-long Q&A where they're just pelted with these objections, and they're really, sometimes really tough objections that are really hard to respond to on the fly. And I hear all the time people say, it's a good point, I need to think more about that. Maybe you shouldn't say that to every single question, because then it's like, whatever. But I do think being willing to say that is super important. And again, that doesn't mean you don't have good reasons or evidence for your position. And that doesn't even mean that you can't rationally continue to believe your position. But I think it's just sometimes we need to look up something and talk to some people. And we don't know everything. Like, just because you believe something doesn't mean you'll know all the arguments for and against. And I think having the humility to admit that will actually go way further with the person than trying to make up something on the fly that doesn't make sense or isn't a good answer.
Okay, so wait a minute. Another admin also wants to insert a question. You know what, Dr. Les? These things are very good. That's why even a lot of guys want to follow up with questions. So just if you mind, we're gonna ask another question from Carl from us.
Yep, thank you, bro. So I really want to ask this question to you, Dr. Liz, because there are a lot of people who is also wondering about this, and presuppositional approach to apologetics is widely popular here in the Philippines. So I'd like to know your thoughts on, is the presup approach some form of a confirmation bias?
That's an interesting question. I actually haven't thought about that. I need to think more about that. No, I'm sort of joking, but yeah, yeah. So I take the presuppositional approach to be something like this. You try to show that both that the Christian worldview is coherent, and then also that people tend to borrow things from the Christian worldview in their own reasoning and living, so that to live coherently, they need to presuppose that Christianity is true or something like that, right? So yeah, I mean, I guess I'll say I at least don't think that's the only way to defend Christianity or do apologetics. So I think it's great to try to give arguments in maybe what's called natural theology, where you try to start with premises that they might agree with to, lead to the conclusion that God exists. So I'm very open to that. I don't see a problem with that at all. And I do, one thing I hear presuppositional people say, which I don't really agree with, is that people actually don't have intellectual barriers to Christianity. I don't want to straw man them, so maybe they all don't think this, but I've heard them say this before, that the barriers to Christianity are just because they don't want it to be true, or they have a hard heart or something. And I actually don't agree with that. I think people really struggle with genuine doubts. And I know people that want God to exist and want Christianity to be true, but they have these questions that they just can't shake. And so I think in those cases, giving them evidence and arguments can actually be extremely useful. And I think also pointing out too, that I think faith can be compatible with doubt. And I think you can be a genuine Christian, you can have a genuine Christian commitment and have questions and doubts. I think that's super important as well. So again, I don't think being 100% confident is required or even necessarily the best place to be in, because I think we should look at the evidence and, maybe we won't always be 100% confident, and that's okay. And I think God cares more about our commitment than about our confidence. So yes, it's good to be confident that God exists, but you don't have to be certain all the time. I think certainty is overrated. And I think what really matters is that commitment. So I'm kind of rambling right now, but yeah, I'm not opposed to the presuppositional method. I just don't think it's the only method that's good or viable. I think there are other methods that are good as well for sort of the reasons that I gave. So hopefully that at least sort of answers the question.
All right, let's try to go back. This is only a couple of questions left, Dr. Lizasan, if you don't mind. So this just one question. So we have a passage here from Scripture where then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Do you think this is pro-faith and an anti-evidence kind of situation? And what can you say about people who say to see is to believe, rather than to believe is to see? Some kind of variation of that.
Yeah. Sorry, I like to try to write the questions down just so I can make sure to address
Yeah,
different
I
parts
see.
of them. Yeah, so I mean, this is an interesting passage, and it's one that, again, I would like to learn more about from biblical scholars. But here I will say this. One thing that's really important to note, and I feel like I've been saying this a lot, but maybe it's just good to repeat. Seeing is not the only kind of evidence, right? So seeing something or touching something, that is an important kind of evidence. Empirical evidence is often what that's called, but there are other kinds and sources of evidence, right? And so I think what Jesus is saying here is, blessed are those that have not seen and yet believe. And that would include a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
We didn't see or touch Jesus. We didn't live when Jesus lived. At the same time, that does not mean we don't have good evidence that Jesus rose from the dead or that Christianity is true. And so I think what Jesus is saying here, I mean, again, I'm not a biblical scholar, and so I don't want to say I have authority to speak to this, but I do think it's important that I don't think what Jesus is saying is that blessed are those who believe without evidence. That's not what Jesus is saying. There's different kinds of evidence, and we have different evidence today than people back in Jesus's day had. And so I think our faith, even though we haven't seen Jesus, can still be rational and still be based on evidence. I think was there another part to the question that I missed?
No, I think you already covered it. It's for those
Okay.
people who say to believe, and then you will see.
Mm.
So there are people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting too. Yeah, so I think too, I mean, that's sort of related to this idea of like taking a leap of faith. And I think there are cases where taking a leap of faith is actually totally appropriate. So William James is a philosopher that I'm a huge fan of. And here's an example that William James gives that I think is really interesting. So maybe I'll just share it with everyone. So let's say you're hiking in a desolated place and you get lost and you can't find your way home, and you run out of food, you run out of water, you're sort of walking around, and then you're like, oh, I finally found the path back home. I finally found the path back to civilization. You're walking on this path, you're so happy you found the path, and then you run into this deep crevice, and it's kind of wide and it's really, really deep. And to get back home, you have to make this jump over this crevice. Here's your situation, right? So let's say you estimate there's about a 50-50 chance you can make the jump. If you believe that you'll make the jump, you'll get zeal and energy and passion, and you'll be more optimistic, and that'll maybe even potentially let you jump a little further. It makes it more likely you'll actually make it, and believing it is really your only chance at surviving. You could also disbelieve it, and you could say, no, I'm not going to make the jump. You'd probably just die out there in the wilderness. That's the only way you know how to get home. And if you believe you won't make it, you probably won't even try. And this is what I think is a really interesting about this case, is it's almost a case where you have to kind of put yourself out there and go beyond the evidence a little bit and believe you can make the jump. That makes it even more likely that you'll make the jump. And then you kind of you have to take this leap of faith. So I think like cases like these are really interesting. You're not believing against the evidence. It's not like it's a 1,000-foot big crevice and there's no way you would ever make it. But I think sometimes taking that risk can actually be a good thing. And this comes back to too what I'm saying, like the value of true belief. Like true belief is really valuable. And if you just sit around and be skeptical about everything, you're going to miss out on a lot of things you could believe. That not only is it valuable to believe truth in and of itself, but belief leads to action, right? And acting on those truths is also valuable. So I do think there's something to be said for taking that leap of faith. And I think Augustine said, I believe so that I can understand. We're never going to have everything figured out. I have been studying this stuff for half of my life, and I still have questions and doubts and things. I don't have a perfect answer to the problem of evil. And again, you're not going to be 100% certain. And I encourage you, take that risk. You could get a true belief, and that's awesome. So I think taking a leap of faith is good, especially in cases where it's like, again, if it's like 100% sure that it's false, that's different. But cases where your evidence really could go either way, I think taking a leap of faith is
where you're given two options, and the probability might be equal. Going to say 50-50, or even something of that sort. There's better. If the one option has better reasons for you to believe in it, and then probably take that course. This reminds me of your work on the Pascal's wager.
It's all related. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And can we? This is like the last question already, if it's okay. So someone asked on our live chat, saying this one: is there any particular argument to show that Jesus is God logically?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
It's more like an application now from our critical thinking to our philosophy and theology.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are some really interesting arguments for the resurrection. And they are based on historical premises. So they're not always philosophical arguments. I think it's also interesting to think about, could we have a philosophical argument for Christianity that doesn't just appeal to like certain historical facts, but maybe appeals to like certain special features of Christianity. I think the fact that we're saved by faith is really cool, and not a lot of other religions share that. So, maybe there's something really powerful there to be like a philosophical argument for Christianity. But maybe I'll say this too, like everything we've been talking about today with arguments and premises and conclusions, those premises don't have to just be philosophical arguments. So you could have historical premises, you could have scientific premises, you could have premises about what you ate for breakfast, right? So I totally think, there's been a number of people that have given arguments that Jesus rose from the dead or that Jesus was God, especially ones that start with historical premises. So the basic idea is that given certain facts that most historians agree upon, they'll start with these like minimal facts like Jesus existed, Jesus was crucified, the disciples believed that Jesus rose from the dead. Sometimes they'll add one or two more to that. Given those facts, the best explanation is that Jesus did rise from the dead. I want to share something in the chat because I think my friend Jordan has a YouTube channel, and it's called The Analytic Christian. And he has about a 20-minute video that I think gives an excellent, I just found it. Hold on. It's an excellent summary of a version of this argument. And so I'm going to share it in the chat, and I'm going to encourage everyone. So that video is called The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus. And I think it's a really good video that sort of summarizes some of the arguments that Jesus did rise from the dead. So I really recommend that video to people if you want to check that out. This is not my personal area of specialization in philosophy, but check out that video.
Dr. Jackson, you might have shared that to not everyone, or at least maybe I can't see.
I shared it to, I'm sorry, I shared it to someone who direct messages me. Sorry,
it's okay.
Brian, let me reshare that. Okay.
No problem.
Brian got the message, or Brian. I don't know if I said that right.
There it is. We see it now.
Does everyone see it now? Okay, awesome. Sorry about that. Also,
So guys.
Also, I'm sorry. I'll just say really quick, if you did direct message me, I have not been checking the chat. So I'm very sorry if I missed some people's messages.
It's okay. Don't worry. We got them.
Say that.
Don't worry. So anyway, Dr. Jackson, thank you so much for the wonderful lecture. Thank you for the wonderful Q&A. Like, we really appreciate even your character and how you are so transparent and honest about the things how you answer them. So this is really important. Like, and we have a lot of quotes of the night. Like, one very memorable thing is that there are many weird people online, and we will take out of that. We'll just post it on a banner. Anyway, so that was wonderful, and hoping to have you sometime again on our CTT lecture. So I'm going to pass this time to Dunhope or Kyle.
Just want to really appreciate Dr. Liz for a very awesome presentation, discussion. When I learned philosophy and just the basic logic with Kyle, it was really a game changer for my life. Like how I deal with people, how I talk to them, how I argue with them. It's really helpful. I hope that this session is also very helpful to everyone. I'd like also to know, Dr. Liz, that people online are actually also very grateful for everything that you have learned tonight. So just want you to know that. Thank you so much. So just before I move forward to my other task tonight, just like to make announcements. So on the month of June, next month will be CTT's Bible month. So that will be the emphasis of our contents on the page, and also with our upcoming Sunday night sessions. So we will be focusing on the reliability of the Old and the New Testament, and we will have scholars to discuss those topics with us. So I hope that you all would be present to be with us again during the time. We have the I would say the leading scholar on the NT to do the lecture with us. So I hope you will be there. Also, we have Philosophy Fridays. We don't have the next the date yet for our next session, but we will announce that on our page. Also, for those who have joined our Sunday night session just this time, where if you haven't checked our page yet, we have a Facebook page, the Christian Think Tank PH. We hope you to check it out, follow, like the page, and share it to your friends. We produce contents on a daily basis, and we hope you to share those to your church or to your friends. Both the unbelieving and the believing. And this is good news also to everyone. We have been handling or hosting a lot of sessions already. So we have actually been working also with our YouTube channel. So we're gonna launch that this week. So we hope you will check it out, subscribe, and then share also the link to your friends, their community. So and we also have the Christian Think Tank Discussion Hub on Facebook. That's a private group community there. So you can find the group and then join, and then just answer the questions, so that you will be approved. So you can join the discussions if you have questions, that you have topics or follow-up questions with the sessions that we have, then you can ask that there and we can discuss. So I think that's all for our announcements. This time we will be asking Dr. Liz for his prayer concerns, so we can pray for her as we end. Dr. Liz.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just had to unmute. You can hear me. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I think there's, a couple things. So my family and I, we live in Tampa right now, but COVID has kind of made everything really weird, and we have to figure out when we're going to be moving to Canada at some point, but there's so many unknowns right now, and just a lot of kind of logistics to figure out with that. So I think one prayer request would just be, as we're figuring out moving and being here, would definitely be something you could pray for. Trying to think if there's other things. Yeah, I guess just praying that. I mean, one thing I'm really passionate about, that's on my heart, is that people would realize that there are Christians out there doing philosophy, and they don't have to stick their heads in the sand, and faith isn't belief without evidence. And just pray that people would know that, like see the work that's being done by Christians, and realize that there are good reasons to believe that Christianity is true, and just pray for the ministry of Christian philosophers. I do think most of us see ourselves as doing some kind of ministry. I mean, it's in a different way than like maybe a traditional missionary, but I do think with the students in my classes, with people that, like things like this on YouTube, it's really important to me that these people see the truth. So that would be kind of another prayer request. So.
All right. Just hearing those prayer concerns, we kind of like see what's in your heart. All right. Yeah. So I think someone said that's the reason why CTT exists also. So shall we all pray? Let's pray for Dr. Liz, and then I'll lead you in the closing prayer. Let's pray. Lord God, we thank you so much for this wonderful night with such a humble servant of yours, Dr. Liz. Thank you so much for her availability. Thank you, Lord, for making her the person she is right now, and how she has become a blessing to the Christian community. Father, we're praying for her family. They have their plan to move on to Canada. We're praying, Lord, for your way, for your will, for your favor. Protect them, Lord, in these difficult times. I don't know what their needs are, or what needs to be processed in moving to Canada, but I'm praying for your help, for your favor, Lord. Also praying for her ministry. I know that she's teaching. Praying for your sustenance on her, Father God, with her research, with whatever she's studying, praying for your knowledge and wisdom, Lord, praying uh, for your Holy Spirit to work in her heart, Lord, that in this, we would say, intellectual field, she will all the more experience you and know you through this, Father God. So we're also praying for the wide range of ministry, considering the Christian what the Christian philosophers are doing, Father God. We're really praying that you will bless this ministry, these people who are doing this ministry, Lord, that the truth of Christianity, or the truth itself, Lord, will be known to the world. We're praying for the Christian community itself also, Father, to be open, to welcome different methods in finding the truth, so that they will know these skills, and also be all the more be equipped in reaching the world, in telling the world about the truth about Jesus Christ and about God Himself. Lord, we thank you so much for tonight. We praise you for all the things that we have learned. We're praying that these things will really form us, will build us, will equip us to the future opportunities and ministries that you will open for us as we live our lives as Christians, as your children, Lord. Help us, use us with the things that you have provided for us to minister to the world. Continue to protect us and preserve us, even in these difficult times with the pandemic. Continue to use us mightily in each of our fields where you have put us, Father God. This is our prayer. To you be all the glory and honor. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.